Think of basic bread and meat thrown together by rural Appalachian families in the 1970s. Think again. Some of the most ingenious, resourceful, jaw-droppingly creative sandwiches in American food history were being served up in hardscrabble mountain communities and dusty southern back roads. It's not just food. It's survival, dignity, and heritage. It's a full immersion in kitchens where mothers were culinary engineers, turning scarcity into sustenance. Get ready for a taste of true Southern ingenuity. Fried green tomato sandwich. Late summer out in the country in Georgia and the Carolinas meant the frost was coming, and you had to get your gardens in fast. I cut these thick, seasoned cornmeal, fried them in cast iron until they turned bright brown and crackling outside, tender still to a bite, and tart to clear through. Arm rolled through the mayonnaise, sandwiching 2 slices of soft white bread. It summed up that brief, wafer-thin period between summer and winter. The beauty wasn't in the taste, but the texture. A satisfying crunch leads into the tangy brightness of barely ripe fruit, cut against the richness of the mayo. This sandwich was in several small mountain towns and tobacco country, a testament to resourcefulness, nothing wasted. Every single tomato was used, even those that didn't ripen on time or still turned into dinner. Families shared these at church socials, at lunch pails for fieldwork, or served them at supper when cash crops were being harvested. This sandwich survives today in Southern soul food restaurants, a delicious reminder of just how some of America's very best comfort foods were born by creativity and hunger.
Fried catfish sandwich. In southern river town and country, catfish brimmed the brooks, and fried catfish sandwiches were an item of local tradition and real very available luxury. Catfish were cleaned, prepared into fillets, dredged in cornmeal seasoned with paprika, cayenne, and salt, and deep-fried until golden brown in abundant hot oil. Delicate, tender flakes of meat with a mild taste of sweetness. Coleslaw and tartar sauce smeared on soft bread or fried cornmeal buns with these sandwiches. That's summer. That's the local church fish fry. That's celebration. For a family living near water, catfish was free and self-sustaining protein. In the Mississippi Delta, catfish sandwiches meant resourcefulness meets abundance, a feast made possible by a day's work. And this sandwich is still around today because it is really, absolutely delicious.
Pork and vinegar sandwich. In the hardscrabble years of rural poverty, it was pork that fed Appalachian families. All of the pig has been applied. The pork and vinegar sandwich, cheap cuts of pork shoulder, boiled until falling apart tender, shredded, and doused in sharp, acrid vinegar with pepper and salt. It wasn't liquid smoke like the means of barbecue. It was acetic acid in its extremity, and it sliced up through the fattiness of the flesh like a knife. Potent, hot over biscuits or soft white bread, the sandwich was tart, a little chewy, and wholly satisfying. It wasn't uncommon for vinegar to serve 3 functions: preserving the meat when refrigeration was not working well or very scarce, tenderizing tough cuts, and most importantly, making just a little bit of meat stamped down in bread go a long way. That was a weeknight supper in West Virginia and eastern Kentucky, made in huge batches that would feed families of 8 or more. Sharp, puckering vinegar eventually became comfort itself, the taste of survival, ingenuity, and the kind of food that doesn't need money to be magnificent. Chitterlings Sandwich. Pig intestines, the ultimate nose-to-tail eating long before it was ever trendy. Softened by hours of boiling, then flavored with vinegar and spice drenched in fat. Served between bread to offer a flavor decidedly distinctive and strong. Chewy, with just a slight bit of gelatinous texture, placed on soft bread or biscuits, often with hot sauce and onions. This sandwich was brilliance on the cheap, because it utilized parts that would otherwise be thrown away. Chitterlings speak to cultural heritage and resourcefulness in Black communities across the rural South. From time immemorial, perhaps what families understood as ancestral cooking, dismissed by outsiders nearly as poor man's food. Carrying stories of survival and celebration, today this dish survives as soul food, proof that some foods endure not out of mere trendiness, but rather from true importance and deep flavor. Fried liver mush sandwich. Pan-fried liver mush toast. One has been breakfast from the streets of Appalachia to North Carolina's Piedmont since the earliest days and remained a supper secret. It allowed one slice of meat to stretch out across an entire family's meal. Lunchtime cornmeal binder gave enough nutrition boost to last for days. Cornmeal-bound liver mush sandwiches were an Appalachian and Northern Carolinian cultural tradition representative of innovative resource management. Liver and onion sandwich. Liver, of course, was inexpensive, nutrient-dense organ meat that found its way onto working-class tables. Cut thin and fried in butter with onions until the liver became tender and the onions melted into sweet mush. It developed an incredibly deep savor, almost mushroom-like. Piled onto bread and served in sandwich form, here iron, B vitamins, and contentment itself broke imaginal bread together. Mothers knew its richness. So little in quantity, further went a long way, especially with a large family to feed. This sandwich was the teaching to the generations that to eat from every part of the animal is basic family economics and nutrition. Peanut butter and pickle sandwich. The combination was created out of Depression-era ingenuity, and it actually stuck around because, believe it or not, it worked. Creamy peanut butter with dill pickle slices, or sometimes with pickle juice drizzled over the peanut butter. It had a peculiar, very Moorish taste. More specifically, it was seasoned with salt, accented by the pickle's sourness against the richness of the nut butter, and served as a good dip for the sandwich with brine undertones. The peanut butter is crunchy because of the pickles, which the peanut butter by itself just can't do. And the vinegar cuts the richness. It was very cheap, but gave complete nutrition too. This sandwich poses to us the question of what combinations we take for granted work, showing that ingenuity is true innovation. Grape jelly and loaf meat sandwich. This in combination sounds pretty strange once you understand just what poverty-era ingenuity had to provide. Processed loaf meat lunch meat that is pretty cheap in price provided sweetness and richness with grape jelly spread directly onto the meat. The sweetness of the jelly would cover over the metalloid tang of the cheap processed meat, while the bread would offer a neutral stability. The sandwich gave a mental consolation that was beyond the lowly ingredients themselves. Kids liked them specifically, and mothers would make them knowing grape jelly would pamper an inexpensive meal for somebody. It costs nothing for a jar of grape jelly in comparison to the energy it gives for one's work or studies. Peanut butter and bacon sandwich. Such a combination really represents the moment when scarce resources could be combined into something truly luxurious. Crispy bacon for smokiness and salt, and creamy peanut butter for richness and protein. What the bacon adds is smokiness. What it lacks is salt, combined with the inherent sweetness of peanut butter. And what it lacks in the form of saltiness present in this preparation and matched with the inherent sweetness of peanut butter, while richness of peanut butter matches with smokiness of bacon. In some rural homes, it was special occasion food, made when great love was being shown. Bacon creates that crackling crunch, giving way to creamy peanut butter. And it's the texture contrast that makes this sandwich stand in honest deliciousness. Bean loaf sandwich. Dried beans forms the protein spine of life in rural South Carolina. Inexpensive to store for long periods and dietetic enough to keep a family fit. When the income was low, the housewife cooked bean loaves by mashing cooked beans together with crumbs, egg, chopped onion, and seasonings, and baking the mixture the usual meatloaf way. Cut thick and fried until crisp at the edges, they had a close, meaty bite. Put between buttered slices of bread, along with a slice of cheese, and a little dab of mustard's perfect, because now there's complementary protein. The protein is produced when beans or bread supply the amino acid necessary for a day's work. In some rural homes, it was special occasion food, made when great love was being shown. Bacon creates that crackling crunch, giving way to creamy peanut butter, and it's the texture contrast that makes this sandwich stand in honest deliciousness. Pimento cheese sandwich. The Southern sandwich spread, the holy trinity of pimento sandwiches, sharp cheddar cheese, roasted red pimentos, and mayonnaise. Cheeses got shredded, mixed with mayonnaise, and sometimes a little mustard and hot sauce was stirred in at home. The result was a creamy cheese, a little tart with just cracks of heat and sweetness shining through. Slathering this thick onto soft bread, and you have sandwiches fit for potlucks at church and ladies' luncheons. In the South of the early 70s, pimento cheese was something to represent high simplicity, made with purpose and pride. It transcended economic class. Though everyone understood its value, this sandwich lives today as a Southern tradition, proof that when some combinations get their balance so perfect, they become immortal. Deviled ham sandwich. Deviled ham came in little tins, cheap and easy to keep on hand. Add mayonnaise, mustard, and pickle relish. Turn it into a paste that filled sandwiches all over rural America. The taste was salty, sharp, kind of smoky, mouth-filling with more going on than you'd ever expect. Church picnics made good use of these sandwiches. They held together well and didn't need hours of refrigeration. Not one bit of it in places where there wasn't any real cooler around to be had. Women took pride if theirs came out smoother and in the right hit of spice. Deviled ham showed how even basic ingredients could be turned into something special, bringing people together. Corned beef hash sandwich. He referred to corned beef hash as a sandwich that uses leftover boiled corned beef from the previous night's dinner, mixed with diced potatoes and seasonings and pan-fried crispy. This wasn't really breakfast for anybody. This was supper that was made after Sunday roast dinner, once everything was gone. The filling was pressed in cast iron till a crust grew, then stacked onto bread with tomato sauce, perhaps an egg fried in that grease. To work in poor neighborhoods, this sandwich meant ideas in using resources to like a pinch of meat turned into yesterday's potatoes, and a few scraps of meat ended up as something more considerable than either could be alone. Potato and onion sandwich, a sandwich that first originated out of the need during the Depression and which stuck because, well, it really helped. Potatoes and onions boiled are mashed up with butter, salt, and pepper, then spread on bread. Starchy, filling, and almost for free. This trapped the community of Appalachians between security and survival. Potatoes do not spoil fast, are a source of carbohydrates and energy when one's back struggling to make ends meet. They find a way of feeding all those mouths. This sandwich proves that at times, the most sustaining food is not with the flavors and techniques, but with the basics, security, and assurance that one will never go hungry. Canned salmon salad sandwich. Canned salmon was the rural family's miracle food, shelf-stable protein that was budgetable and nutrient-dense. With mayonnaise, diced celery and onion, and relish. It wasn't peas and carrots, but it was nonetheless a networking of sorts. The flavor was salty and umami-packed, and rich. For those living in the countryside, where fresh fish was not on hand, canned salmon was like an open door to treasures from the ocean, sort of cosmopolitan compared to beans and bacon. The value of this sandwich had to do with how accessible and yet luxuriant it seemed. These 15 hillbilly sandwiches are more than food. They tell stories of families making do with what they had. Stories of survival, stories of creativity, and stories of the rural American spirit. They remind us of a time when life was slower. Meals meant family, and nothing, absolutely nothing, was wasted at all. If this journey into forgotten food history made you smile or brought back memories, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because we have many, many other stories, recipes, and forgotten traditions waiting to be rediscovered. Thank you for watching, and here's to keeping the old ways alive.